The human fixation on transformation is perhaps one of the most enduring elements of our shared cultural narrative, particularly when that transformation involves stepping out from the blinding, unforgiving glare of the public eye into the complete and total obscurity of a blank page. For decades, the modern landscape of entertainment has accustomed us to a very specific trajectory for those who find themselves thrust into the spotlight at an early age. A path often defined by an inability to escape the fictional characters they were forced to portray during their most formative, vulnerable years. It is a rare and deeply unsettling phenomenon when an individual decides to completely dismantle the architecture of their public persona, discarding the security of a highly lucrative career to pursue something entirely volatile, unpromised, and deeply solitary. This shift requires a profound level of creative audacity, a willingness to sit alone in an empty room with nothing but the heavy echoes of one's own thoughts, trying to forge an entirely new identity from scratch while the rest of the world watches with a mixture of intense curiosity and profound skepticism. The arduous journey from being an object of public consumption to becoming an active creator of complex literary worlds is fraught with psychological hurdles, yet it represents one of the most compelling artistic evolutions of our contemporary era, leaving many to wonder what truly happens behind closed doors when the cameras permanently stop rolling and the real, unvarnished work of self-discovery begins. To fully understand the immense gravity of such a transition, one must look closely at the sheer, paralyzing terror that accompanies the decision to walk away from the only world you have ever known at the fragile age of 24. Imagine leaving behind a highly successful, firmly established path in Hollywood to intentionally immerse yourself in absolute obscurity, spending 5 long, grueling years writing in complete silence without any guarantee that a single word you produce will ever see the light of day. It was a period marked by profound emotional vulnerability, characterized by countless sleepless nights and moments of overwhelming despair, where the simple, humble dream of receiving just one paycheck as a professional writer felt like an impossible, distant horizon. During these lean and highly uncertain years, the internal battle against a relentless inner critic was constant, a grueling exercise in human persistence where plays, teleplays, screenplays, and short stories were continuously drafted and discarded in a desperate attempt to locate an authentic, uncorrupted creative voice. Before we dive much deeper into how this agonizing process ultimately laid the foundational bricks for an extraordinary literary career, take a quick moment to subscribe to our channel and join our community, ensuring you always stay connected as we unpack the deep stories, hidden struggles, and major cultural movements that define our modern world. The absolute uncertainty of this artistic exile was a powerful testament to an internal compulsion to create, a visceral bodily understanding that the mind had no choice but to try. Even when the financial and emotional stakes threatened to collapse the entire endeavor into failure, when the silence was finally broken in the summer of 2022, the result was nothing short of a massive cultural earthquake that resonated across the global literary landscape, completely shattering industry expectations and redefining what a modern memoir could achieve. The publication of that deeply raw, unflinchingly honest reflection on personal trauma, complicated parental codependency, and the dark underbelly of early television stardom did far more than just climb to the absolute top of the New York Times bestseller list. It established an immediate, deeply loyal connection with millions of readers worldwide who recognized the profound courage required to speak such painful truths. The overwhelming, unprecedented success of the memoir exceeded the wildest expectations of its author, turning an intimate act of emotional exorcism into a massive public phenomenon that validated years of silent, agonizing labor in empty rooms. Yet, achieving such monumental acclaim with a deeply personal history carries its own unique set of artistic challenges, raising a critical, looming question that every great storyteller must eventually face. Where exactly do you go next when you have already given the world your rawest, most vulnerable reality? And how do you successfully transition from the factual truth of your own life into the limitless, unpredictable realm of pure fiction? The intricate answer to that question actually began to take shape several years earlier, during a solitary journey that felt worlds away from the chaotic, demanding energy of the American entertainment industry, serving as a quiet reminder that the seeds of great stories are often planted in moments of complete isolation. Traveling alone through the heart of Japan, suspended in the sleek, hypnotic motion of a Shinkansen bullet train, as the foreign landscape blurred past the window in a wash of neon and ancient hills, A singular creative spark suddenly ignited in the mind of the young writer, introducing a protagonist who simply refused to be forgotten. This character, a unique and unforgettable figure named Waldo, entered the creative consciousness alongside a complex web of adult relationships and underlying tensions that would take years to fully mature, evolve, and untangle within the author's mind. The initial inspiration on that high-speed train was just the quiet beginning of an incredibly rigorous creative odyssey, a multi-year process that would eventually require nearly 20 complete, exhaustive drafts to refine, shape, and perfect into a cohesive piece of art. This meticulous, unyielding method of rewriting, of embracing what the author candidly refers to as the chaotic vomit drafts before painstakingly polishing every single sentence, illustrates the immense discipline required to transition from raw human instinct to a beautifully structured literary debut, setting the perfect stage for a brand new fictional story that promises to explore the deepest, darkest corners of human emotion, consumer culture, and repressed female rage. The transition from the deeply personal and visceral world of autobiographical writing to the structured, highly imaginative realm of fiction requires an entirely different psychological framework, one that forces a creator to completely abandon the safety net of their own lived experiences. As the initial creative spark that ignited on a Japanese bullet train began to steadily solidify into a formal narrative structure, the true, grueling nature of the literary process began to manifest in ways that would deeply test the boundaries of human endurance. Developing a novel like Half His Age was never going to be a casual part-time endeavor. It quickly demanded a total, unyielding surrender of daily life, transforming the author's existence into a highly disciplined, almost monastic routine designed to fully protect the fragile creative mind from the constant loud distractions of the modern digital world. For the first full year of production, the manuscript became a singular, consuming obsession, establishing a rigid daily ritual that began the exact moment the author woke up, brewed coffee, brushed teeth, and immediately plunged into the deep, unpredictable waters of Waldo's world before the external universe could intrude. To maintain the absolute purity of this creative focus, drastic measures were implemented, including the radical act of changing phone numbers multiple times throughout the writing cycle and completely banning any interaction with a mobile device until the daily writing goals were fully met, establishing a protective barrier against a hyper-connected society that constantly threatens to fracture an artist's concentration. This intense, uncompromising commitment to the craft reveals a fascinating evolution in the author's personal philosophy of writing, moving away from the rigid, superficial constraint of meeting arbitrary daily word counts in favor of pursuing a far deeper, more elusive standard of literary excellence. In the earlier stages of her creative journey, the focus had been heavily placed on simply generating volume, pushing to hit specific numerical targets like 1,500 words a day. But this mechanical approach was eventually discarded when it became apparent that raw quantity rarely translates into genuine emotional resonance or narrative strength. The goal shifted dramatically from merely producing a large volume of text to the painstaking cultivation of just a few hundred incredibly potent, beautifully crafted words each day. A deliberate slowing down of the process that allowed the authentic voice of the narrative to slowly rise to the surface. By the second year of development, which stretched deep into the demanding months of 2025, the workload expanded exponentially as a second major creative project entered the equation, forcing the author into grueling marathon sessions that routinely stretched until 2 or 3 in the morning. Half His Age was fiercely prioritized as the primary work of the morning, receiving the absolute freshest, most vital intellectual energy of the day. Before the exhausted author would reluctantly shift her focus to the secondary manuscript in the quiet, late-night hours of the morning, illustrating the immense physical and mental toll required to balance multiple complex narratives simultaneously. At the absolute center of this evolving, highly complex fictional tapestry sits the uniquely captivating protagonist named Waldo, a character whose highly distinct and unusual name remained entirely unchanged from the very first moment she entered the author's imagination on that fateful train ride in Japan. While other characters within the manuscript underwent significant transformations, their names shifting and morphing through various iterations, Waldo and her deeply problematic writing teacher, the enigmatic and unsettling Mr. Corgi, remained completely fixed, serving as the immutable, solid anchors around which the entire narrative universe revolves. The development of Waldo's specific, highly individualistic voice within the text, mirrors the author's own intense, decade-long struggle to locate her personal creative identity during her 20s, a period characterized by the creation of massive, unpolished projects that were intentionally kept hidden from public view. These private, unread drafts served as a vital, completely safe laboratory for artistic experimentation, a necessary period of invisible growth where the author could aggressively mimic, deconstruct, and ultimately move past her greatest literary influences without the paralyzing fear of external judgment. It was through this quiet, hidden process of trial and error that she was able to absorb the blunt, wonderfully simple sentence structures of Charles Bukowski, the deeply unsettling social commentary of Ottessa Moshfegh, and the profound, dark humor of Tom Perrotta, eventually weaving these disparate threads into a singular, highly potent prose style that defines her debut novel. As the writing process deepened and advanced through nearly 20 exhaustive, deeply transformative drafts, the story itself began to exhibit an unpredictable, almost sentient autonomy that frequently caught the author completely off guard, shattering her initial outlines and expectations. There is a common, often romanticized trope among seasoned novelists that characters will eventually take control of their own destinies, making choices that directly contradict the author's original plans. A concept that the author herself used to deeply cringe at until she found herself directly experiencing it within the pages of her own manuscript. She would frequently arrive at a critical juncture in the plot where she had carefully predetermined that Waldo should take a specific logical path, only to realize during the actual writing that the action felt completely false, flat, and emotionally hollow for the character she had so meticulously built. Even when the author attempted to force Waldo into the planned direction, a subsequent reading would instantly reveal that the choice completely failed to track emotionally, forcing a total capitulation to the character's internal desires and leading to massive, sweeping structural changes throughout the entire middle section of the novel. The first 50 pages of the manuscript presented a particularly agonizing, highly intricate puzzle that required endless shifting, moving, and reordering of entire chapters to establish the perfect, tension-filled atmosphere. While the definitive ending of the novel remained a steady, glowing beacon of certainty that guided the author through the chaotic, stormy waters of the rewriting process, ensuring that no matter how much the journey shifted, Waldo would always land exactly where she belonged. This profound, organic evolution of the narrative allowed the author to fearlessly dive into heavy, deeply uncomfortable thematic territories that are rarely explored with such raw, unvarnished honesty in contemporary commercial fiction. At the very forefront of these ideas is an intense, unapologetic exploration of female rage, a powerful, often suppressed emotion that the author recognized within her own life as a massive, completely unprocessed force that was desperately seeking a constructive creative outlet. Within the framework of the novel, Waldo spends a vast majority of her time fiercely suppressing an incredible burning anger, actively refusing to confront the underlying sources of her fury. A psychological state that directly mirrors the lived experiences of countless women who have been societalized to internalize their discomfort rather than weaponize it. By framing this intense rage against a backdrop of modern consumerism, complex power imbalances, and the pervasive feelings of shame and inadequacy that continuously drive human decision-making within a materialistic culture, the text transcends the boundaries of a simple coming-of-age story. It transforms instead into a gripping, highly tense psychological portrait of how the modern world systematically exploits vulnerability, inviting readers to look beneath the sleek, polished surface of Waldo's complicated relationship with Mr. Corgi to examine the profound, often terrifying undercurrents of desire, control, and emotional survival that define the human condition. The culmination of this intense multi-year literary odyssey marks far more than just the release of a highly anticipated debut novel. It represents a profound, deeply symbolic reclaiming of personal narrative autonomy for a creator who spent the earliest, most formative chapters of her life serving as a vessel for other people's words. When Half His Age finally landed on bookstore shelves, it did so not merely as a commercial product, but as a monument to human resilience. An undeniable proof that it is entirely possible to completely dismantle a life built on public expectation and reconstruct it on a foundation of pure, uncompromised artistic merit. The incredible full-circle moments that accompanied the completion of the book, such as receiving a deeply meaningful cover blurb from literary icon Tom Perrotta, whose work had heavily influenced the author's own writing voice during those early, uncertain years of silent exile, served as a powerful, validating confirmation that she had successfully transitioned from an outsider pounding on the gates of the literary world to an established, highly respected peer within it. This extraordinary achievement stands as a brilliant guiding light for anyone who feels permanently trapped by their past circumstances, demonstrating that the ultimate trajectory of a human life is never fully written by the choices made for us in our youth, but by the relentless, quiet work we choose to perform in the absolute dark. By fully unveiling the core of Waldo's turbulent world, the novel forces a vital, highly necessary cultural conversation regarding the immense, often invisible emotional labor that young people, particularly young women, perform as they navigate complex structures of authority, mentorship, and adult desire. The deep resonance of the book lies in its uncanny ability to evoke a universal truth, tapping into the collective memory of what it truly feels like to be 17 years old, standing on the precipice of adulthood while desperately trying to suppress a burning internal rage in order to fit into a world that demands compliance, silence, and emotional assimilation. Readers who approach the text from a position of greater maturity are instantly forced into a profound, occasionally uncomfortable confrontation with their own past selves, looking back down the long, winding corridor of time to recognize the specific moments where they too felt small, inadequate, and utterly powerless against the manipulative dynamics of older, more sophisticated figures. This collective identification turns the reading experience into a shared act of emotional processing, a therapeutic space where the audience can finally confront the deeply repressed anger of their youth, examining its immense value not as a destructive, chaotic force to be feared, but as a highly valid, incredibly powerful tool for self-determination and personal liberation. Furthermore, the author's unique journey offers a deeply moving blueprint for how we might all look back at our own histories with an enhanced sense of grace, understanding, and radical compassion, rather than the sharp, lingering sting of regret or embarrassment. It is an unfortunate human tendency to look back at the decisions of our younger selves through an incredibly harsh, unforgiving lens, judging our past actions with the advanced wisdom, emotional tools, and critical insights that we only manage to acquire much later in life through painful trial and error. Through the specific, highly localized struggles of Waldo, the narrative gently reminds us that we were all at one point or another doing the absolute best we could with the incredibly limited resources, knowledge, and emotional defenses we had available to us at the time. By allowing Waldo to make mistakes, to stumble blindly through the intricate labyrinth of her relationship with Mr. Corgi, and to fiercely protect her own autonomy even when her choices seem erratic or self-destructive, the book provides a masterclass in psychological survival, urging us to embrace our flawed pasts as essential, foundational stepping stones toward our present strength. The profound impact of this debut novel extends far beyond the immediate confines of its specific plot, sending ripples through the broader creative community and challenging traditional ideas about the natural trajectory of an artistic career. It stands as an enduring testament to the idea that true creative fulfillment requires an ongoing willingness to destroy the comfortable versions of ourselves in order to allow something completely new, authentic, and completely unvarnished to be born. The ultimate legacy of Half His Age will not merely be measured by its impressive sales figures, its position on national bestseller lists, or the widespread critical acclaim it continues to gather from the highest echelons of the literary establishment, but by the quiet, deeply intimate revolutions it sparks within individual readers who find themselves mirrored in its pages. As audiences around the world continue to engage with Waldo's unforgettable voice, sharing her fury, navigating her shame, and ultimately celebrating her survival, they are invited to join the author on a much larger, incredibly profound journey of healing, proving once and for all that while our stories may begin in places of deep silence and profound isolation, they have the ultimate power to echo across the world,